Hello, boys and girls. I'm so glad you're here with me today. You guys did amazing last week on your math work. And this is going to be we're going to continue going through our lesson just like we were in class. You guys did awesome. But I want to remind you of something. Sometimes our lessons start out a little bit more simple and then they get more complex. They get a little bit harder as we go. Today's lesson is going to get just a little bit deeper into what we're studying. So I'm going to need you to really pay attention. If you get confused, you can always rewind it and watch it again and really dig into kind of what we're learning, okay? Ready to dig in? Here we go. Okay, so today's lesson, we're going to talk about describing sides of polygons. Now, some of these terms we're going to talk about today, we've already maybe mentioned or you've heard in conversation, but you may not know exactly what they mean, okay? So we're going to learn some new vocabulary. I'm going to stop and start a couple times going back and forth. You know how sometimes they'll introduce us to vocabulary and then we need to figure out what word we're going to use. That's what we're going to do today, okay? So our essential question is, how can we describe line segments that are sides of polygons? Now remember, when we look at a polygon, we talked about how we have angles, which is where those 2 points come together. And then we also talked about we have line segments inside our shapes. So you can see, we kind of talked about that each side can be defined as a line segment, okay? Now, look right here what they're wanting us to do. It says, look at the polygon. How many pairs of sides are parallel? Well, if we don't know what the word parallel means, then I can't answer this question. So we're going to have to come back to answer this one, okay? But look right here. It says, how do you know the shape is a polygon? Does anybody remember what we talked about a polygon has to do to be considered a polygon? Anybody remember what that was? I know one of the definitions includes that it has to be a certain type of shape. It either has to be opened or it has to be closed. Okay? Now, to be a polygon, it must be a closed shape. Okay? And then it talked about the line segments. Do you guys remember anything from the line segments that we talked about? Does anybody remember what we said? Let me find. We actually talked about that a polygon has to have those line segments that meet only at the end points. Okay, so here we don't have where this is hitting. Oops, sorry. Give me just a second. I'm so sorry. I had a phone call go off. So we have a closed shape, which is what defines a polygon, and we also have line segments that do not intersect. They only meet at their endpoints. So we have segments meeting only at endpoints. And that pretty much is the definition of a polygon. But I still can't answer my question about whether these lines are parallel or how many pairs of sides are parallel. So what I need to do is I need to look at our vocabulary for today, okay? Now, you're going to think I'm crazy. I'm going to hide this side of the page because I do not want you to get too far ahead and get confused, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to work down the page first, okay, and learn our vocab. So we have 3 different types of lines we're going to talk about today. The first type of lines we have are called intersecting lines, and intersecting line form angles. So in other words, this is where we have lines that are going to crisscross, okay? Sometimes they'll make an X, sometimes they'll be, a little further up the line. But what I want you to notice is that it creates 4 angles when I have these 2 lines that intersect. I have an angle here, I have an angle here, I have one here, and I have an angle there. Okay, so that's those intersecting lines that form those angles. Okay, then we have another pair of intersecting lines. These can also be defined as intersecting lines, but these are what we would call perpendicular lines. And the reason we call these perpendicular lines is because it creates 4 right angles. See how that is showing me this is a perfect right angle? Like I could take the corner. See, I could take a corner of a piece of paper and line it up right there, and it's going to be a perfect right angle. And it would do that for all of these. Technically, all of these would be considered a right angle, okay? So this type of a line, when it makes more of a T formation, it is an intersecting line, like the X, but it is known as perpendicular because I have those 90-degree angles, okay? Those perfect right angles. Okay, and then we have another form of lines that are known as parallel lines. So lines that appear to never cross or meet and are always the same distance apart are known as parallel lines. They do not form any angles. So this is the only form of these three angles or lines that does not create angles, okay? I can't make an angle because this line is forever going to go this way. This line is forever going to go this way, just like railroad tracks, okay? So that means they're never going to cross over each other to form an angle. Remember, to have an angle, I need something like this, where I have two lines that are going to intersect across each other to make angles, okay? These can't do that, so I can't form any angles with these, okay? Now, let's look over here. Now we can dig in. It says the orange and the blue line segments. Oh my goodness, whoever wrote this must be an Auburn fan. War Eagle. The orange and blue line segments meet and form an angle. So they are, now, would you call this a perpendicular or an intersecting line? These are going to be called intersecting. Do you know why? These are going to be called intersecting because this is not a right angle. This did not make a perfect L shape. So it cannot be perpendicular, but they are going to cross. If this kept going this way and this kept going this way, then look, I have intersecting lines, okay? Now, if I look right here, it says the red and blue line segments meet to form a right angle. So they've told me this makes a perfect L, so I could put that little line there. So these are just two lines. Okay, see how that made two lines? Now, it says these two lines are going to form a right angle. So how would we define these lines? These lines would be known as perpendicular. Okay, now down here I have a green and a blue line. Okay, now this one is forever going to go this way. This one is forever going to go that way. Remember, if I don't have those points on them, they're not stopping. So they're going to forever go in the direction that it looks like they're drawn in. So are these ever going to meet each other? These are going to look like my railroad tracks down here. So what's the term we use for that? Parallel lines. So these would be known as parallel. So we have parallel, perpendicular, and intersecting lines that we're learning about today. But it asked me about this polygon. It says, look at this polygon. How many pairs of sides are parallel? Now, a pair of sides means I need two lines. And remember, we're looking at two. Okay, now look. I'm going to look at this pair and this pair. Now, would these two be considered parallel? No, this one would eventually, see the angle that's going? It is eventually going to do what? It's eventually going to intersect. But now if I look at these two pairs, or this pair of two lines, remember that one looks like that railroad track. So this pair right here would be considered parallel lines. Okay, so how many in that polygon shape, if I have a shape similar to this, how many pairs of parallel lines does that create? It's only going to create one pair of parallel lines. Okay, think you understand kind of what that means? All right, it says draw this. Draw a polygon with only one pair of parallel sides. Then draw a polygon with two pairs of parallel sides. Outline each pair of parallel sides with a different color. Okay, so I'm going to start with, I want to make sure y'all can see on the screen the difference in my colors. Okay, so my first shape they want me to draw, they only want one pair of parallel sides. So I'm going to use green for that pair. I'm going to do my left side and my right side. Okay, so remember, parallel has to look kind of like railroad tracks. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to make it like this. Are both of these lines going in the same direction? Yes, even though I made them different heights, they're both going to be parallel because if they kept going, they're just going to follow the lines that they're on. Okay. Now, I got to pick another color. Let's see what'll contrast to that one good. Let's do red. Now, I only needed one pair of parallel sides, so this one I can draw kind of at an angle. Okay, and then I'm going to draw this one going that way. Now, what would happen with these red lines if they were to continue going in the direction that I've drawn them in? This one would probably keep coming this way. Can you see those dots on the screen? And then this would go this way. So those would not be parallel, but they would be considered, do you remember what it's called when they cross each other like that? Those would be intersecting lines, okay? Now, it says, now draw another polygon with two pairs of parallel sides. All right, so on this one, I need to draw, can you think of a shape or two? I know two different shapes off the top of my head that has two sets of parallel sides in them. Some of the earliest shapes you have learned about, either a square or a rectangle, because I'm going to do, let's do a rectangle. Okay, here's my first set of parallel lines. I'm going to draw those in red. Remember, parallel means it's going to kind of look like railroad tracks, okay? They're going the same directions, and they're never going to intersect, okay? Now, I'm going to draw another set, and these are going to be, now, see, this pair, are they ever going to intersect? Now, I'm not talking about are these going to intersect my first pair, but are these two lines, the pink lines, oh, they kind of look the same on your screen. I'm sorry. Let me pick another color. Let's do these in green. I didn't realize that looked so close. There we go. In other words, will the green lines ever intersect the pink lines? I'm sorry. Will they ever intersect each other, not the pink lines? These will never intersect each other. See, I'm going to kind of exaggerate my lines here, make them a little bit bigger. These would never intersect each other, okay? Just like the pink ones, they're like railroad tracks. So the rectangle or a square both consist of two pairs of parallel lines, okay? It's talking about the line that is opposite of it, okay? If that makes sense. All right, let's look at our share and show where we do these together. It says, which sides appear to be parallel? Now remember, it says right here, it says, which pairs of sides appear to be the same distance apart? Okay, so you're looking for parallel lines. Okay, so if I'm going to look at line B, how can I find another line that looks parallel? I always think of the railroad tracks. Where's another line that makes it look like it would be going in the same direction, just like railroad tracks? That would be this line. So B and D. Okay. Is there another set of parallel lines? Well, we just talked about this in our last problem, that rectangles and squares both have two pairs. So that means that line C, see how it's going from left to right at the top, and also line A. So C and A would also be considered parallel lines, okay? All right. It says look at the green sides of the polygon. Now, on my screen, I'm not sure if you can tell very good. On the screen I'm looking at that you should see, it's kind of hard to tell. So I'm going to kind of go in and exaggerate the lines that they're wanting you to look at real quick. Just so you know which lines we're talking about. There you go. Now you should know which ones we're talking about. Okay, it says, look at these green sides of the polygon. Tell if they appear to be intersecting, perpendicular, or parallel. Okay, write all the words that can describe these sides. All right, now let's do this together. Number 2 says, what kind of, we know we've got a polygon. Now, what kind of lines do we see? Now, we're talking about this one and this one. Now, if I were to extend these lines and get them to keep traveling in the direction they're in, are these ever going to intersect with one another? No, they're not. So what's that called when they never will intersect or touch each other? That is called parallel. Okay. Number 3. All right, on this triangle, we're looking at this line and this line. Okay. We can already tell they've come together and met. Okay. So we know that can't be parallel. It's either going to be intersecting or perpendicular. There is a really unique characteristic that perpendicular has to have. It has to give me a right angle. So let's look at this angle. This looks like that less than. Remember how we talked about the less than or greater than, a right angle? This is one of those that would be considered less than. So that would not give me a reason to make it perpendicular. So this would be known as intersecting because, as we can tell, if this were to keep going, these two lines are going to intersect. So we are going to call this intersecting lines. Okay? Now let's look at number 4. All right, now these are the two lines we're talking about. Now notice if they keep going, what are they going to do? They are going to intersect. But we are not finished. Although this does describe these lines, this has one of those neat characteristics. If I go in, I can draw a right angle, which also makes this one perpendicular. Remember, it said to write all the words that describe the sides, and that would describe both of them, okay? All right, now it's your turn, okay? I'm going to have you do problems number 5, 6, and 7. It says, look at the green sides of the polygon and tell if they appear to be intersecting, perpendicular, or parallel. Write all the words that describe the sides. Now, I don't know if you can see which ones are green, so I'm going to go really quick and show you. They're talking about this top line. I'm trying to make it a little bolder too. And the bottom line. Would you describe these two lines, just the green ones, as intersecting, perpendicular, or parallel? Remember, it says all the words. Don't forget. There may be a tricky one like this one up here gave us, okay? Okay, now on number 6, they're talking about this right leg right here. And they're talking about this bottom leg. Okay? Are those two going to be intersecting, perpendicular, or parallel? All right. Now on this little pentagon, we got a 5-sided figure, makes it a pentagon type of polygon. We're going to talk about these two lines. Okay? Would you describe these as intersecting, perpendicular, or parallel? I'm going to give you a little bit of a hint right here and give you a little sign. Look at that. Okay? So you're going to do 5, 6, and 7. And then I also would like for you to do numbers 8, 9, and 10 right here. Okay? I hope you can see that. I'm going to take a picture and send this to you, okay? But you're going to do 8, 9, 10. Let me zoom that out just a little bit. There you go. Okay, now, what they want you to do is use these blocks that are right here. You've got block A, B, C, D, and E. So they've even labeled them for you. And you're going to tell me on number 8 which blocks have intersecting sides. Which blocks have some parallel sides? Which blocks have perpendicular sides? Now, this can get a little tricky. I just kind of want to challenge you a little bit more, okay? This up here, 5, 6, and 7, that's pretty simple. That's the kind of stuff you're used to doing on your own all the time. This is where we always kind of have a little bit more of a challenge, kind of like a hot problem. This is going to be a little bit harder, but I want you to see what you can do, okay? Want you to see if you spot some of these shapes that already have parallel sides, like those two shapes we talked about, and there's other shapes that have more parallel sides than just a square. I want you to look at this one. Notice how this line and this line, you're looking for those railroad tracks, okay? So see if you can find any of those. All right, so you're going to do 8, 9, and 10 as well, okay? And there may be only 1 or 2 answers, or there may be 3 to 5 answers. Okay, just take your time and work through these. And as long as you're trying your best, that's all I'm asking you for, okay? I know this was a little bit harder today, especially on these, but I know you can do it, okay? All right, great job today, guys. Don't forget to submit this. If you get finished and you still have a few minutes that you'd like to spend on some math, I have assigned you some Math Prodigy on these polygon shapes and learning how to describe them and identify characteristics of polygons. So if you get finished, you can get on Math Prodigy. I'm going to start doing on Monday nights when we have our Zoom meeting or our live meeting. I'm going to start announcing who's in maybe the top 5 for Math Prodigy. Okay, so when you get some free time, get on and answer some questions. Okay, all right, I love you guys so much and I miss you, and I'll see you in our next lesson. Bye bye.